Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 563, I Could Not Prove the Years Had Feet. Now, here we have another poem about Emily making the decision, maybe, to be a poet. Many have read it this way. I like to think of this poem as proving Emily as an integral thinker. We think of the great Ken Wilber as an example of the integralist position or thought, transcend and include, as we have sometimes pointed out in his study. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 562 poems. We just finished with 562, Conjecturing a Climate, because then you can set this poem within the other times when Emily was what one scholar has called embarking on a new stage of life. Some have seen this as one of Emily's most personal poems. 7 times the word I is used in this brief poem. I think it's another poem about perspicacity. Notice the I-C of this poem. Perspicacity, from our study of Plato's Republic. That ability to have some kind of insight as we emerge from the darkness of the cave into the light of the sun. You'll recall our study, all of it there at learnstrong.net as well. This is how she says it. I could not prove the years had feet, yet confident they run am I from symptoms that are past and series that are done. I find my feet have further goals. I smile upon the aims that felt so ample yesterday. Today's have vaster claims. I do not doubt the self I was competent to me, but something awkward in the fit proves that outgrown I see. Now, of course, the key word here is the word outgrown. In other words, we live all our life moving from one situation to another situation. As we do so, we transcend and include. We go beyond. You'll remember in our study of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, full lectures, of course, at learnstrong.net, we call that series Talks with Walt. You'll remember at the very beginning of Song of Myself that he says that he is going to place schools and creeds in abeyance. He's going to hear what they have to say, but he's going to move beyond them in his poetry. I think Emily's doing a very similar thing here in this poem. She says, I could not prove, notice we go from proof to doubt, that the years, notice capitalized, had feet, yet confident they run. In other words, time moves on. Am I from symptoms that are past and series that are done? In other words, there's parts of my life I'm now ready to move beyond. I find my feet, we're back to feet again, had further goals. This will, of course, be the idea of vaster claims in a few seconds, right? I smile upon the aims that felt so ample yesterday. And you know, you guys have all had this experience where you start thinking back to the concerns of an earlier time in your life, and you have to kind of smile to think, I can't believe I was so given to that idea, or I can't believe that actually mattered so much to me. Now, she says, they felt so ample yesterday. Today's have vaster claims. Now, some have read this as Emily's decision to be a poet, to say, no, I'm going to go ahead and go for it. And obviously, we've read so many poems where she was playing this game. She says, I do not doubt, notice we go from proof to doubt, the self I was competent to me. In other words, I'm not casting aspersions of the way I used to see the world, but something awkward in the fit proves, notice now we're back to the first line of proving, that outgrown I see. This phrase I see is used in 15 of her poems. It is interesting, the argument that she makes, that there comes a time in your life when you have transcended a prior stage. You include parts of that prior stage, but you've now transcended and you're ready to move on. At 2b, the 7 I's, I think, of this poem make it a very personal poem. At 3a, I mentioned Ken Wilber. Marriage of Sense and Soul comes to mind as a classic example of this integral perspective, if you're interested in running that to ground of transcending and including. I can't help but think of Hamlet and the challenge for Hamlet as things that used to matter, now don't matter, because there is a vaster claim, to use the language of Emily. Think about how his whole view of the world changes when the revelation comes to him of his father's murder. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Finally, in 3b, when was a time to own a poem like this? What was a time when you understood that your life had already undergone this kind of transcending and including, and something was awkward in the way that it once was? Maybe Emily's poetry and the study of her poetry is playing that game for you. I hope so. Thank you.